All right, students, welcome to the lecture for the section on budgets for PAD 4232. This week, we're going to go over what you need in your budget and a couple of, we'll do some housekeeping on a couple of items toward the end of the lecture with some stuff that's coming up. It's going to be due here a couple things this week, and we'll talk about getting ready for the midterm. We're only a couple weeks away from that, so keep that in mind as you're doing this. I hope you've been taking pretty good notes. If you haven't, go back and watch the lectures and get your notes together for it. Look over the literature that I've been posting. It'll help you tremendously for it. But I'm going to go ahead and share the screen real quick, get us on the PowerPoint so that you are ready to go there. All right, so you should be seeing the PowerPoint now. And a couple things we're going to talk about is going to be how to recognize what you need in your budget. What are your needs for your budget? That's very important because you're working on paying for and getting funding for a project or a program, something you're trying to do. You're applying for a grant. And in applying for this grant, you have to keep in mind that the grantor wants to see where the money's going. They're going to want to see a budget. All right. So you're going to need to know what's going into the budget, where you need funding at. Do you have salary? Do you have materials that you need to buy? Do you have supplies you need to buy? Do you have to get facilities for it? Those type of things, okay? So recognize what your budget needs are. Then understand what of those needs need to be included in your budget for your grant. There are certain things that maybe you don't have to put in there. If you're, you're going to go buy paper cups or something, that's one thing that, that's going to be an incidental along. Maybe that's not going to be included in it. Maybe you're paying for that out of a separate fund because that's another thing you want to think about is where all your funding is coming from to build your budget with that. And hopefully by the time we're done with this, you can demonstrate how to build a budget, how to build, not builds a budget there. So little typo. Don't take any points away. Y'all be nice. All right. So for your budget, first thing we want to do is understand your grant requirements. Now I talk about these each week that grants have requirements you have to meet. All right. What are those requirements? What are we doing with those? All right. So they're going to outline what expenses are eligible to be paid for, what the maximum funding amount is, deadlines to apply for these funds. That's going to be your deadlines to submit your budget. There may be certain deadlines for items that need to be bought, depending upon how they set up the grant. So specify what criteria you need, and then look at what the budget or what the grant offers, and does your criteria line up with what the budget and what it must meet. So look at your eligibility. You want to pay close attention to eligibility criteria. Is your organization and the proposed program in alliance? Does it fully align with the grantor's focus area? We talked about this a couple of times. You don't want to apply for a grant from someone who is doing a completely different type funding than what your project or your program is. You especially as you're looking at your budget, because now you're going to begin to look at how much money you need. What type of funds do I need to make sure my project is successful? My program is successful, that I can accomplish what I want to do. So I need to know what those, that I'm applying for the right one. Then there's going to be limits. So these grants are not bottomless pits of money that you will get. They're not going to just say, here, take all you want. It doesn't work that way. You're going to need to, work within a limit. How you can work within a limit is, do you have funds already? If it's a program that you're including in something you're already doing, maybe there's already funds set aside for it. Have you done any fundraising for it? A lot of times grantors want to see that you know how to raise funds. They want to see that you can supplement what they're willing to give you and be able to create a program and follow a budget and work within those parameters. So they're giving you a budget of $250,000. They want to see, are you going to be able to raise money that will add to that? If it's a matching grant, one of those types, you're definitely going to need to make sure that you can show you have the funding for it, prove them that you have the funding, because they're going to want to see that you have this. All right. So what are your restrictions? Know if there's any costs that are not allowed or have a specific limitation. So they may earmark that the money can be spent on A, B, C, E, and F, but on D, you cannot spend it. All right. So they'll say that. So how does that come about? Well, the reporting requirements. You're going to have to report where this money's going. A lot of times they want to see reports. They want to hear back from you. How is it going? Where have you spent the money? Show us what you've done. If you have stepped outside the parameters of what they said you could do and cannot do with the money, they may require you to return funding. And the last thing you want to do is secure funds, work on your program or your project, and then mess up somewhere and have the grantor pull back those funds, which they're well within their legal rights. If they set restrictions, you step outside those restrictions, they can legally do that, because when you enter into the grant with them and that agreement that you'll sign, that is a contract, a legal contract. And they're saying, we'll give you this money for this as long as you stay within these. So they're giving you that based upon what they're expecting you to do, a performance they're expecting you to do. So you'll need to stay within those parameters. And outside of that, you've breached that agreement. And in doing so, they can legally pull back those funds from you. And you definitely don't want to be in a position to where that can happen and cause you to not be able to complete your project or have to go searching for funding to be able to complete it. So make sure, and then understand what your reporting is going to be. They may want a detailed quarterly budget. They may want a detailed monthly budget, or they may want you just to send them, information on how things are going. Depending on how tight they're going to manage it from the outside is going to have a lot to do with that. Know what your components for your program are going to be, because this is what you're paying for. All right. So you'll need to know your key components to be able to build your budget. So what are the activities we're doing in our program? What resources do we need? What kind of timeline are we looking at? And then what goals and objectives? Now, some of this is stuff you're going to put in another section of your grant proposal, so you'll have this information. It just, when it comes time to build your budget, you need to pull from that information and begin to look at what the expenses are going to be. So you're going to put your goals and objectives in your budget proposal. You're going to talk about what your activities are in your budget proposal. The resources you need will be something that you discuss and in line with your budget. And then your timeline, you're going to want to show this is where we're at and this is what we plan. That step by step of showing that grantor, this is what I plan on doing. When you do that, it allows you to then look at this and say, okay, well, this is where I'm allocating these funds. I'm allocating X number of dollars here. I'm going to allocate X number of dollars here. So when I'm doing that, I need to make sure that I'm fully explaining this. I fully understand it myself, and I can show them this is what we're doing. Part of getting to the point of being able to build and write a excellent grant proposal that they just cannot resist is understanding all these pieces yourself. It's real easy to write up a outline and put things together on the outline and write a proposal and not fully understand it. You can build and write around, that scaffold that you'll have but it doesn't do a bit of good if you do not understand the pieces, because it's not going to show in your writing that you're knowledgeable enough to receive these funds. When they're looking at this, they want to see that you have the knowledge to be able to do what they want you to do, to be able to complete the project in the way that it needs to be completed, to be able to get the project even off the ground. You know, sometimes a lack of understanding in all the pieces will completely hinder it from being able to take off and be what it needs to be. So you need to keep those things in mind. What are your costs? Okay, we're going to talk about direct and indirect costs. All right. Direct costs are those explicitly associated with your program. You want to break those costs down into some categories: personnel, supplies and materials, equipment, and travel expenses. You should have an entry for each one of these in your budget. The pieces that you do with it will need to be broke down also. Personnel cost. All right. So what are the personnel? List the personnel. Even if they do not receive pay, if they do not receive any type of salary, list them so we're showing everyone who is there. That gives us an idea of who our volunteers are, who our paid employees are for the program or for the project. List all those personnel costs. What are their salaries? Are you giving them some type of benefits for this? The money that's going to go into it, whatever money you're spending on personnel, needs to be detailed in your budget. All right, now break it down so they fully understand it, so they can pick it up when they go to the budget, because there's going to be somebody at the grantor, and whether it's government, whether it's private, whatever, there's going to be one person who's going to be looking at the budget. They're going to make a recommendation based off the budget. Someone else is going to be looking at all the other pieces. You're going to have someone who's, experienced in it, but somebody's going to look at that budget, and they're going to know enough about a budget to be able to decide whether or not you're putting everything in the way it needs to be. So you have to be careful with that. All right. So then your supplies and materials. You need 500 number 2 pencils. Do you need, 35 cases of, college ruled notebook paper? What do you need for your project? Are you going to have to buy books for this? What office supplies you're going to need? You're going to need to put together stuff. If you're doing a program that's an after school or a summer program for children to help them continue their studies in the summer, or to finish their homework, or to study more on the subject after school, you're going to have materials that you got to put together. You're going to need some type of, activities that you do. So that stuff's going to cost money. What are you paying out in that? All right. So we're talking about real big costs right off the top. Now, equipment could be something that, maybe your supplies and materials, if it's just a matter of making copies, maybe you use an Office Depot or a Staples to do your copies, or you go somewhere else to get your copies made, or you send off and get them printed. However it may be, maybe you don't need a copier. But what if you have equipment? What equipment will you need? If you're doing a project, you're going to definitely have equipment that you're going to have to pay for to do the project, from anything as simple as shovels and rakes all the way up to if you need to rent heavy machinery to dig a trench to put down concrete for a playground, to build the edge around it. Those type of things are important. And then there's going to be travel involved. All right. So if we have, employees that are going and, they're picking up items, they're doing this, are we going to pay them? What are we going to do there? It may not be as extensive as airfare and lodging, but if the project is something large, or the program is something large, we may need to send members of our staff. We may need to send them to training. Maybe we send them to a conference that trains for the type of things we're wanting to do, or maybe in, a neighboring area, we send them to a program similar to ours to kind of get ideas and learn from it. If we do that, then we're going to need to cover some travel expenses there. So, we need to make sure that we're getting all those things listed. Then your indirect costs. Indirect costs are, they cover overhead expenses that'll support your program, but they may not be specifically tied to certain activities. Administrative costs, utilities, you're going to have to pay some utilities, most likely if you're in a space, if you're doing a program, you're probably going to have to pay at least for electricity. You may need internet. You may need office space. You may need a space for the staff. No matter if that staff is 1 or 50, you're going to need somewhere for them to get together, and build all the reports you're going to have to do, because you're going to have to need some place to do these reports and to do this stuff. Submitting a budget and a grant proposal that says you're a one-person show is probably going to be a good way to get it denied. You need help. Anytime you take on a program or a project, you're going to need help. So you're going to need places for that help to get together. Even if this is a volunteer group, you're still going to need somewhere for them to meet. All right. So you need somewhere that's separate from everybody's houses, separate from, somewhere that's quiet where they can get together and begin to bounce ideas off of each other. So you're going to need to pay for that kind of stuff. Make sure that, once again, this kind of stuff aligns with what the grantors will allow. There's only some of them may not pay for indirect costs. Some may have a percentage, but you'll need to see in their guidelines of how the dollars can be spent. What is those guidelines? What can they do? What can you not do with it? And then justify your cost. You've gone through, you've seen your costs, justify those. This is where you give your explanations. So you submit an Excel spreadsheet with your budget numbers that does all the math. It lines everything up. It's detailed. It gives me down to the 1 cent piece, the pennies, what my budget is. Well, the next thing I'm going to want to see is a detailed written out description of where this money's going. What is the explanation for these budgets? So numbers on paper work real good, especially for someone who is numbers minded. But then you need to explain to that, because you can give me a whole bunch of numbers over here, but if it just has one line description, I'm not going to understand exactly what it is. And on your budget worksheet, that's pretty much what you're going to have. This is for this one, personnel. In your breakdown of your budget in the section of your grant proposal, that'll say budget, that'll be headlined budget. That's where you're going to want to explain what this is. Break down the cost. Where are they necessary at? If you can get these funds, how will they impact the program? If you cannot get these funds, how will that negatively impact the program? Show why you need those funds for those specific items. All right. Then once again, turn all this around and align it to the goals of your program and make sure they align to the grant you're applying for. If you get all the way to this point and you realize that what you have does not align with the grant that you were going to apply for, it's time to step back, reassess, and find the grant that matches. All right. Find the grant that matches at this point. And then you're going to review it and finalize it. All right. So you'll review the entire budget. This is where you get somebody to look at it. All right. So if you're the person, you're building your budget, and for the purposes of what you're doing, you're building your budget. This is, you're going to set this up, review the entire budget for accuracy, make sure that it fits the grant requirements. There's clarity in it. Double check all your calculations. Make sure that you didn't put one number in wrong. I remember years ago taking an accounting class and sitting for 5 hours trying to find 5 cents. And it was way back in something else I'd put in wrong. So make sure that you're double checking your calculations. You want it all to line up. One wrong number, one wrong decimal place can change the whole amount of what you're applying for. It'll have you either applying for way more than they're willing to put out, or you'll run hundreds of dollars short, because once that calculation continues to carry and carry and carry, it's constantly taking money away. So make sure you're checking that. Check your compliance once again. Make sure all your guidelines are met that the funder is set. So make sure that whatever the grantor is looking for, you have adhered to all those guidelines. And then your supporting documentation. That's going to be the description, that walkthrough that you're going to include in your budget proposal. That's going to be your extra documentation. Did you get quotes from someone for them putting in a playground? Do you have quotes from several different places for copying materials? Justify why you're spending that way. If you've done this kind of thing before, show historical data that you have on the cost. If you haven't and you know someone who has, once again, get some historical data. Programs in our area that have done similar projects have spent X amount of dollars on this, this, and this. So show why you have that. All right. So that is your details going in. All right. For your budget. All right. So make sure you're following those. If you need to watch this a couple of times just to get it clear, please do that. All right. So then the last thing you're going to do is submit it. So always submit. But before you submit, what do? Make sure you're following guidelines. Make sure that your summary is detailed. That has your clear budget points. When you open up your budget section, summarize it, then go into detail. And then proofread it. Review the entire grant application and budget for consistency and accuracy before submission. So before you submit it, and you're going to do this because you're going to submit a rough draft before you submit your final draft, and you're going to need to review it and make sure it's good, proofread it. All right. So that kind of covers a budget for this part. We're going to do some more detailed stuff at a later time. We will build there will be a video just on building your spreadsheet, getting it set up for what you need. That'll come in line around the time that I'll be requiring you to submit that budget for me to look over and make sure that you're in line with what the parameters are that have been set up, that I'll be releasing to you in the near future after the midterm. I don't want you, sweat it too bad before we get to the midterm, but I'll release that to you, and then you'll start building those pieces. All right, so